Hey, this is Oliver and welcome to another hopefully very entertaining and helpful tutorial. This is the first one to our series from 3ds Max over to Cinema4D, and we worked 14 years with 3ds Max and V-Ray, and we decided a few weeks ago to switch over to Cinema4D and to Redshift. Okay, and the first time we started Cinema4D, we had a huge bunch of issues modeling and working like we were familiar with in 3ds Max, and I decided to make a tutorial to get you guys kickstarted and give you the most common things I had issues with using Cinema4D if you come from 3ds Max. So the first is we have for canvas view, the same like in 3ds Max, you have these little icons here, the same like the cube in 3ds Max in the upper right corner. On this one you can move your canvas, here you can pan your canvas, and here you can rotate your canvas. And my mouse, I have a left and right mouse button of course, and I have also the middle mouse button. If you select your canvas and you click the middle mouse button, you get full screen. If you click it again, you come back to your for canvas view. For example, if I would like to go to top, left mouse button, and again left mouse button, back to my canvas. You also can switch with the F1 to F4 key. So F1 is perspective, F2 is top, F3 is right, and F4 is front. So you can switch with the F keys. So you first have to learn to no longer use your P, T, B, left, and R key. So these are the views in Cinema4D. Okay, so to bring in some geometry in Cinema4D, I mean, this is self-explaining. You have these primitive icon here. If you click on that with the left mouse button and hold it down, you have your primitives. And if you select the pyramid, it drops down the pyramid to your canvas. You can't see that because it's inside the cube. And let me hide the cube. I just click this little green thing here, and here you have your pyramid. Okay, so bringing in some geometry to Cinema4D is, I mean, self-explaining. So the next thing is we have the display option, and this is important. If you click on the display option, you have, I think, quick shading is standard. You have constant shading and lines, and you have quick shading and lines. So those lines means it gives you the lines, the geometry, the mesh of your primitive. Okay. And of course, if you select the pyramid, you have the pyramid settings here, the basic, the coordinates on the canvas, and the object which says size, means X, Y, and Z, and the segments. For example, if you increase the segments to, let's say, 15, you got 15 segments of this pyramid here. Okay, let me delete that and let me show you the cube. Again, I click on the cube, I got my object settings, and I like to have 5 segments in each direction, and we're done. Okay, so on these cube here, on this cube layer, you got these little bubbles. If you click on that, you can click along and nothing will happen, and this is because this is the view for the render. So if it's green or gray, it will render. If it's red, it will not render. And the same for the canvas. If it's gray and green, you can see that. If it's red, it's invisible, but it will be rendered. Okay. So to manipulate this geometry to go to poly modeling in 3ds Max, I would like to make a right click to the cube and will select my convert to editable poly. Or I will go to my modifier stack and make an editable poly modifier on top of my geometry. This is not the way it works in Cinema4D. Okay, in Cinema4D, to get access to this geometry, you have to drop down the primitive to the canvas, and you can do so by clicking this little button here. So if you click that, you will see you get automatically editable poly with all the vertices and all the lines and all the polys. Okay, And you see here, you got this icon here that tells you this will be a editable poly. Okay, so here you have the poly select modes. This is for the vertices. If you click that and you select the vertices, you go to the select tool. It's important, click select tool, and now here you can select the vertices and play around. And the same for the edges. Here we go, we select the edges. You see, selected, and the same for the polys. Okay, so there are some other selection tools. If you click on that, you get the live selection, which is very handy. You see, you got a preview of your selection. If you hold down the left mouse button, you can paint your selection, which is very handy. Okay, and if you hold down Shift, you can add polys to your selection. So this is quite handy. And to orbit around, you can also use, of course, here these, as I said before, these little icons here, but there are also some shortcuts that are very useful. If you hold down the Alt key and the middle mouse button, you can move your canvas. If you hold down Alt and the left mouse button, you can orbit. And if you hold down Alt and the right mouse button, you can zoom. It's the same like in 3ds Max. So this is how I orbit around. So back to the selection mode. You have here the select menu. And if you click on the select menu, there's a very cool thing that's called loop selection. And you see the preview. If you hover over your polys, you get a loop selection. If you click, you have all the polys looped selected, which is very handy. One thing that is, and that works, of course, the same for vertices and the edges. Okay. If you hold down Shift, you can add to your selection. If you hold down String, you can remove from your selection. Okay. So one thing which is closely similar to 3ds Max is the right click and, for example, the bevel or the extrude mode. So let's go to the bevel mode, for example, and you have selected bevel, and now you can go to your selection, hold on the left mouse button and move your mouse, and you will see you can simply extrude this. And the difference between this to 3ds Max is you can manipulate that afterwards. So I had done my extrusion, and here I have the number of subdivisions. So as you see, I can change the subdivisions later on. I also can change the extrusion later on. And here's the max angle. And this is for some reason to create some more geometry. So as you see here, we can extend that over the edges. And because we did a bevel, hold on, we have an offset here. Okay. So everything is cool and everything could be manipulated later on. And of course you can go on and again drop your mouse and play with the settings here, or you select again loop selection, hold on, right click, extrude. Oh, the wrong one. Nicely. Loop selection. I'd like to have this selected. Right click, bevel, and here we go. Nice. Okay. So this is the same to 3ds Max, but remember you can change the settings afterwards. Okay. So what about modifier? In 3ds Max you got a ton of modifiers to play with, and where are they in Cinema4D? So Cinema4D works the other way around. So this is your cube, your geometry layer, and everything you'd like to manipulate should be inside that geometry. Here you got a bunch of modifiers, nearly the same like in 3ds Max, a few more which are very handy. but this is mainly it. Okay, for example, let's go to the bend, and if you have the bend modifier, you see this gizmo box here. Go back to my select tool, and if I'd like to bend something, I click this bend, and I can play with the angle, but nothing will happen, and this is because the bend modifier is not connected to the cube. So to do so, select the bend modifier and simply drop that into the cube. You see that arrow down, and leave it go, and now the bend modifier is inside the cube. And now if you play with the strengths, you can see here is the bend. Okay. Of course, you can put more than one modifier inside the geometry. For example, let's go to the twist, and we bring the twist here into the cube, and let's twist that. You see here we have the twist, and here you can see the logic of Cinema4D. So this modifier stack works the other way around than 3ds Max. So this works bottom to top. So the first action is the bend action. So first we do the bending, and after the bending we do the twist. So this is important. Okay, so everything inside the geometry works bottom to top. Okay, let me delete this. One thing which is also very important for me, or I was searching for a long time, was the soft selection. So in 3ds Max, let's go to my live paint tool, the cube, and let's paint some vertices. Here we go. Let me hold down the string key to deselect this one here, and these I don't like to have this selected. Simply string, paint over them. This is very handy. Okay, so let's say I like to have a soft selection. In 3ds Max you have your soft selection inside the options, but I was searching here for soft selection. Where the heck is the soft selection? Must be possible. I didn't found it, and this is because you have to switch from the selection tool to the move tool, and if you click the move tool you have the soft selection, and if you enable that and make in the preview, you see the fall off field. Okay, and you can play with the radius of the fall off field. Okay, and you can manipulate your geometry. So one thing which is also different to 3ds Max having the soft selection is I'd like only to have the soft selection on this upper geometry. I don't like to have the soft selection underneath that. Okay, and this is the fall off, and if you switch the fall off to something else, let's say dome, bell, no, needle, no, vertices map, no, spline, also not. I was searching for that a long time. And if you know what to click, everything is quite easy, makes sense. Simply have to check the surface option. If you click the surface option, it goes along the surface. So let me increase the radius. Here we go, and now I manipulate only the upper side and no longer the bottom side. Okay. If I uncheck that, I manipulate also the downside. Okay, but it's a quite handy tool to work with, and you can do cool geometry things there. But keep in mind soft selection. As I said, go to the move tool, enable soft selection, check on the preview, and make sure if you like to have the surface selected or the geometry selected. Okay. Let's go over to let's make some mesh smoothing here. So in 3ds Max I have my mesh smooth modifier, and the same thing I have also in Cinema4D. It's here and it's called smoothing, and again I have to bring the smoothing modifier into the cube geometry, and now I got my mushroom. Cool. You can play with the smoothing settings. Here we go. You have the strength of the smoothing. You have the stiffness of your geometry. and you have iterations of smoothing. Okay, the more iterations, the more smoothing you get. Okay, and of course you can manipulate the vertices, so you don't have to deal with big meshes. So you can go to the vertices again, select them like here, and maybe bring some, let's make so, and go back to smoothing, and you see I have my mushroom here. So this is how the smoothing works. If you don't have a clean geometry, you will lose geometry informations because of the smoothing and the relaxing. Okay. There's another way in 3ds Max. Let me uncheck that. In 3ds Max, you have the option to subdivide all of these, but how to do in Cinema 4D? It's also quite easy if you know where to click. If you go to your mesh options, you have here the add option, and here you can add subdivide. For that, I will select, of course, my cube, mesh, add, and subdivide. And if I click this, it will add some subdivisions. And this again will make my smoothing even better. And if I like to have edges, let me put in some geometry here. Let me get rid of this, for example, to showcase you that. Let's drop in a cube. Let's give him 5 by 5 by 5. And drop that down to the canvas and give him some smoothing and put that into the cube, and this is what it looks like. Okay, so bring this up, cube, it's dropped down. So this is the smoothing. Let me undo this, and let's go to my lines. I go to my select tool and to the loop, tools to my loop selection. Here we go. Select the cube, of course. Sorry for that. I'm new to Cinema 4D. Did I told you that? Select loop selection. Here we go. Select this one here, and right click and say bevel. I drop that like so. Okay, and make the subdivisions a bit higher and the tension to a positive value. So here we go, and let's select this one here again, loop selection, and let me bevel that too, just a touch, so that we got two things here, subdivisions 1, and okay, so only that you see what is the difference between these. Okay, now let me do the smoothing, and you see I have the much better result here. And if I go to smoothing and bring the stiffness all the way down, you see here I will lose the information because there are no subdivisions, and here I will keep the informations. So make sure to have a clean geometry before you smooth things, and make sure that you have enough subdivisions to get a clean geometry after the smoothing. If you like to drop down, if you like to collapse all of these to one geometry, so for example you like the smoothing and you like to collapse that, you can right click the cube and can say you can say current state to object. I did it before, and this gives you this copy of your cube. Let me delete this again, once again. So current state to object, and now it creates a new layer with your geometry. And let me hide this, and you will see I select the cube. Here we go. I have my cube with nothing in, no smoothing in. Okay, so this is how you can break down your geometry to a single layer. It always will make a copy that you don't lose the step before. Okay, and this is how you can drop down that to one more geometry. So as we are talk over selecting and all of these things in the geometry tab, in the basic you have the X-ray option. If you click so, you have this look through effect, the same like shortcut, I think Shift X on 3ds Max it was, just forgot it. Here's the X-ray option. Select your geometry, X-ray, and then you can have the look through. And here are some bubbles like S. And what is this for? This is for a solo something. So if you click this, this S button, it's active, it's blue, then only the selected geometry will be visible. So this is cool if you have some projects to work with and you just don't like to see all of the other geometry. You can use this one here. If you click this button again, the solo mode is off. Okay. One more thing I was struggling with Cinema4D was the pivot point. How the heck change the pivot point position? In this geometry it sits perfect in the center, but sometimes the pivot point should be, I'd like to have it here because I'd like to rotate it over this axis. So how to do this? In 3ds Max you go to your modifier panel and you have the pivot point there, and you can manipulate the pivot point there, and then you can work with. Here it's a bit easier and accessible. So you click on this arrow here, on this pivot point icon, and now you can move your pivot point. And if you leave it and uncheck that, this is your new pivot point, and you can rotate all about this pivot point. To bring that pivot point back to center of your geometry, or the geometry to your pivot point center, it's quite easy. You select the pivot point. If you'd like to move the pivot point, go to Mesh and go to Axes, and here you can simply center axis 2, and that brings your pivot point back to the center of your geometry. Okay? So hopefully this is handy. I was searching for that a long time. And another thing I was searching for, and I needed that for some projects, was how to hack animate vertices. In 3ds Max it's quite easy and quite simple. I go to my selection tool, I go to my front view, and let me select these things here, these guys here. And if you animate that over time in 3ds Max with the auto key button, and you come over here and for example let's shrink them down, this was the result. And if I click here and here in Cinema4D, nothing really happens to my vertices animation. And this is quite easy. I was searched for that also a long time. A lot of YouTube videos to look through. Here you got these option here. If you click that, that means vertices animation is ready for keyframing. Okay, simply click that. On frame 1, I simply automatic key and put a keyframe in. Go to frame 60. Shrink that down, let's say here. So I have my soft selection also on. Let me undo this, enable, disable, and now here we go. So, and now my vertices are animated. Hopefully it's also a handy tip. So click this button if you like to animate your vertices. Okay, so next thing, let me get rid of this cube here. We go to spline mode because there are some cool features in, as I think. I'm in my front view. I go to my spline tool. Here you got spline pen, and you got some primitives, the same like in 3ds Max. But I go to my spline pen and I will make this very roughly. I go here, so hold down the left mouse button. And you got this Bezier things here. Here we go. I go back to here. I think you know what that should be if it's finished. So I close the spline here, and I'm ready to go. So this is my spline, and here I have my lathe tool, which is quite cool. I put that in, nothing happens, and this is also, new to Cinema4D. Let me undo the auto key record. So if you generate geometry, let me bring in some cube here and go to the view. So if you have a geometry in Cinema4D, like the cube, and you like to manipulate the cube, you put the bend, for example, the bend modifier inside the geometry. Okay, so this is how you manipulate the geometry. So let me showcase you this here. We bend that. Okay, here you can see. So the logical thing is, if you have the spline and like to have the lathe, you bring the lathe into the spline, but nothing happens. And this is because of the modifier stack or the layer stack in Cinema4D. Cinema4D gets another logic, which is, I think, more logical than in Cinema4D if you know what to do. So if you like to generate geometry, so if you like to come to this point where you have geometry, you have to put the spline into the lathe. And now you have your geometry. Okay? So this is because everything works from bottom to top. So put the spline into to create geometry. If you like to manipulate the geometry, put the manipulator into the geometry. Okay? And make sure that you don't do things like this here and put the bend between the lathe and the spline. This works. So if you bend that, you see the geometry, it works. And of course you also can say to the bend fit to parent. Now everything is inside our glass or whatever. And now if I bend that, you see here we go. Whee. That looks cool. If you put that underneath the spline, it works also. If you put that into the spline, look at that, you will bend the geometry. So also cool, but now you bend the spline. Okay? Looks cool, but not very handy. So just for you to understand how this modifier, this layer stack works in Cinema4D, because this is totally different to 3ds Max, because in 3ds Max everything is a modifier stack, top, bottom, and on the bottom is always the geometry, and here the geometry is always on the top or between some things. Okay, so this is in the first few days, I think you will, you will not be afraid about that, but if you have the idea what to do, it's more self-explaining than you might thought right now. Okay, so this is the lathe, which is quite cool. This is what I wanted to show you. Let me bring the bend to the cube and delete that. So this is the lathe, and the same like the primitive geometry. If you like to manipulate the polys or got access to the polys, you can simply drop the geometry down to the canvas. You got one geometry part here, and now you can start selecting your polys and play with them around. Okay. So what else can I tell you? Oh, let me show you one cool modifier. This one here. Where we can find that. The atom array. This is very cool. So put the lathe into, because we would like to create geometry from the lathe. Okay. And look at that. This is quite cool. You got this very cool grid. And of course you can go to the atom array and you can play with the radius of the cylinders and the sphere radius. So this is also the subdivision level here. So this is a very cool modifier to do some very cool things. And the cool thing is, if you string C and string V, also means copy that, you have your original geometry, and on the outside you have the lathe. So this looks very cool. For example, if you like to have this glass material, to simulate that, I go here to make the X-ray. So this is a very cool modifier. So we have half an hour. This is the basic tutorial for the start. Let me know in the description if you like to join us on our journey from Max to Cinema 4D, and let me know if these hints were useful for you, the tips were useful for you, and let me know if you like to have more tutorials than this. And yeah, just leave a comment below. Sorry, I'm not a native English speaker. And hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully you got some nice ideas and tricks for your Cinema 4D workflow. And we see us on the next tutorial, and stay healthy. Thank you. Bye.